Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight's story is based on a true viral case that still makes locals shiver. It takes us deep into Kuang, a quiet town in Malaysia just outside of Kuala Lumpur. On the surface, it looks ordinary. Roads lined with shops, a few lonely motels by the highway. But one of those motels holds a disturbing secret. Guests who checked in were never seen alive again. Stay tuned, because later in this episode, we'll uncover the chilling details behind what really happened there. And don't forget, subscribe so you don't miss the full story. Our story tonight comes from Vietnam, and at its heart is a man we'll call James. In his early 30s, he worked as a restaurant manager in the bustling centre of the city. His days began late in the morning because nights were long. He'd rush through narrow streets filled with honking motorbikes, make it just in time for deliveries, and spend the rest of his day juggling a dozen different responsibilities. He made sure the cooks kept the dishes moving, the waiters remembered their orders, and the books balanced at the end of each exhausting night. It was steady work, but never easy, and though he took pride in it, the hours consumed him. His wife, Mai, lived a mirrored version of this life across town. She worked long shifts in another busy restaurant, often coming home past midnight with the faint smell of oil and smoke still clinging to her hair. Between the two of them, it was as if their lives ran parallel, brushing against each other in doorways or at the edge of dawn, exchanging tired glances and half smiles before sleep claimed them both. Because of these relentless schedules, their little daughter did not live with them in the city. Instead, she stayed with James's mother in their rural hometown several hours away. It was a practical arrangement. In the countryside, the girl had space to run, a grandmother who doted on her, and cousins to play with. In the city, she would have been stuck in a cramped apartment with exhausted parents who barely saw each other, let alone her. On weekends, James and Mai took the bus back home, carrying small toys, candies, and promises. They sat with her under the old mango tree, telling her stories, listening to her chatter, and each time they left, they said the same words: "We'll be back soon." It was a sacrifice that made sense on paper, but in James's heart it hurt. Many nights, after closing the restaurant, he would sit alone in the small office, staring at pictures of his daughter on his phone, wondering whether she still remembered the sound of his voice, whether she would one day feel more like a niece than a child to him. Life in the city was ordinary, and that was what made it heavy. Their apartment was small and aging, with walls that carried the sound of neighbours arguing and a metal gate that screeched whenever it opened. Sometimes James came home to find Mai already asleep on the sofa, still in her uniform, arm draped over her face, hair undone. He would cover her gently with a blanket, sit in silence beside her, and listen to the fading hum of motorbikes outside. The apartment smelled faintly of soy sauce and detergent, the blend of their working lives. This was their everyday world, unremarkable yet universal. Two young people fighting to keep afloat in a city that demanded everything but returned little. Family pressure was constant. Relatives reminded James, "A child needs her parents. You can't leave her in the village forever." Mai's parents, on the other hand, scolded her for working endlessly, yet saving so little, urging her to think of the long term. Both sets of parents were right in their own way, but the couple felt trapped. If James quit, who would pay rent? If Mai slowed her shifts, who would cover the bills? Their love for their daughter was undeniable, yet every choice they made seemed to push them farther from her. They told themselves this was only temporary, that once they saved enough or once work became stable, they would bring her back. But deep inside, James feared time was slipping away faster than they realized, that his daughter was growing up without him. And it is here that we pause, because this part of the story is one that resonates with almost anyone. Who hasn't felt the tug of war between work and family, between ambition and presence? Who hasn't lain awake wondering whether they are giving enough to the people they love most? James's life was not special. He wasn't chasing power or fame or wealth. His goals were simple: to provide, to endure, to keep the family afloat. Mai's were the same: to work, to secure a better future for their daughter. They were ordinary people with ordinary purposes, caught in the same grind as thousands of couples across fast-growing cities. And yet, it is precisely in these ordinary lives that the extraordinary sometimes arrives, slipping in quietly through the cracks. At this stage, nothing unusual had happened to James. There were no whispers in the dark, no footsteps where none should be, no shadows lingering at the edge of his vision, only the hum of the city, the ache of distance, the loneliness of missing his child. But horror does not always arrive with a scream. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, wrapping itself around exhaustion, feeding on silence, waiting until no one is looking. That is what makes this moment so important. The ordinariness itself becomes the perfect stage for what comes next. Imagine James sitting alone after midnight in his restaurant office. The staff have gone home, the street outside is nearly empty, the last bus is already gone. The fluorescent light above him flickers once, faint and brief. He does not notice, too absorbed in scrolling through photos of his daughter. She's smiling in one, holding a balloon in another, her hand wrapped around her grandmother's. He stares, a mix of pride and guilt twisting inside him. In that moment, nothing about his life feels secure. His wife is working herself into exhaustion. His daughter is far away. His own heart feels stretched thin. And it is in moments like this, when life seems at its most vulnerable, yet most ordinary, that something strange can slip in unnoticed. For now, the scene closes with James lost in thought, unaware that the restaurant around him has fallen too quiet, that the flicker in the light was not just faulty wiring. Outside, the city hums with life, but inside, a different kind of silence is taking root. This could happen to anyone. This could happen to you. The roads stretched endlessly under the dim glow of the highway lights. It was nearly midnight now, and James's car hummed steadily as it cut through the dark Vietnamese countryside. His wife sat beside him, fighting drowsiness, while the thought of their little girl waiting at his mother's home pulled him forward, despite his fatigue. The decision to travel had felt noble, driven by love, not curiosity. But love sometimes leads people into places where warnings hide in plain sight. The first sign came quietly. As they left the last stretch of the city, James noticed the fuel gauge flicker for a moment. It had been full when they left. He tapped the dashboard lightly. The needle corrected itself, steady again, as if nothing had happened. He chuckled, muttering, "Old car, always acting up when I least need it." His wife barely opened her eyes, too tired to reply. The road dipped into a stretch of farmland, and that was when James spotted something strange in the rearview mirror. A motorbike headlight, following them from a distance. Nothing unusual, except the beam never grew closer. For mile after mile, it stayed the exact same distance behind, neither approaching nor falling back. He frowned, adjusted the mirror, blinked, and when he looked again, the headlight was gone. He told himself it must have turned off onto a smaller road. Rural Vietnam was filled with hidden turnings only locals knew. Still, the image of that steady, unchanging glow lingered in his mind, like an afterimage on the eyes. To distract himself, James rolled down the window, letting the night air fill the car. The fields smelled faintly of wet soil and smoke from distant cooking fires. He tried to focus on normal things. He reminded himself they weren't the only ones travelling late. Families visited each other. Trucks carried goods through the night. Farmers returned from markets. He clung to these rational explanations, the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. His wife stirred awake. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Yeah," he lied. Just tired. We'll be there soon." But as the words left his mouth, a crow darted across the road, startling him. It flew unnaturally low, its wings brushing the windshield with a dull thump. The bird vanished into the dark fields, and for a moment he swore he heard the faintest cry, too human to be just an animal's call. His wife didn't seem to hear it. "Bad omen," his grandmother would have said. But James shook the thought away. He was a modern man. Birds, fuel gauges, headlights. These were coincidences, not warnings. He pressed the accelerator a little harder. The highway narrowed into a stretch flanked by bamboo groves. Shadows bent over the road like a tunnel. The headlights of the car carved a path forward, but everything beyond that beam was swallowed by blackness. That was when James noticed something else. A faint, white cloth tied to one of the bamboo stalks. It fluttered in the still night, even though there was no wind. His wife leaned forward. "Did you see that?" He cleared his throat. "Probably someone's offering. You know how people tie things up for the spirits." She hesitated, then sank back into her seat. But the unease remained, hanging heavier than the silence. The road curved sharply, and James braked, his hands tightening on the wheel. For a fraction of a second, he thought he saw a figure standing at the bend, a woman in pale clothing, hair loose over her shoulders. But when the car straightened, there was nothing there, just empty asphalt stretching into the dark. James forced a laugh. "Eyes are playing tricks. Shadows, that's all." But the laugh sounded hollow, even to him. He turned up the radio, hoping for comfort, but the signal only produced static, a faint whispering sound that rose and fell like breathing. He jabbed at the button until a half-clear station emerged, filling the silence with old music. Yet in the moments between static, his skin prickled as though someone were speaking just beneath the noise, a language he couldn't place. His wife tried to sleep again, head against the window, but James kept glancing at the trees. Sometimes he imagined movement among them, bamboo stalks swaying though the night was still, shadows crossing the road though no one was there. Every time he blinked, the images disappeared. He scolded himself. Long hours, tired eyes, nothing more. He had driven this route before, and nothing had ever happened. He repeated that thought until it sounded almost convincing. Still, the road seemed longer than usual. Landmarks he expected appeared later, as if the distance had stretched. When they finally passed a small shrine by the roadside, an old stone altar with incense burned down to ash, James felt a wave of relief. He had seen that shrine every trip home, but this time something was different. Fresh joss sticks were burning there, red tips glowing brightly though it was far past midnight. And beside the sticks, tucked into the crack of the stone, was a child's toy, a small wooden horse. His heart skipped. Who would leave that at this hour? He told himself a traveller must have stopped earlier. He didn't mention it to his wife. They drove on, silence thick inside the car. James tried not to think of the motorbike headlight, the bird's cry, the white cloth, the pale figure at the curve, the burning incense and the toy. Each one could be explained. Each one had a reason. But strung together, they formed a pattern he couldn't deny. His chest tightened, with the sense that the road itself was warning him, laying signs like breadcrumbs he was refusing to read. Yet he gripped the wheel harder and pressed forward, because the thought of turning back, of disappointing his daughter waiting in their hometown, was unbearable. The audience watching knows what James does not admit. These are not coincidences. These are omens, stacking quietly in the dark, and ignoring them will only make the road ahead more dangerous. The road should have ended, yet it never seemed to. James gripped the steering wheel tighter with each pass. Gravel crunched beneath the tyres in the exact same rhythm, as though the earth itself was replaying a track on repeat. A crooked pine tree bent over the road, always at the same angle, like a permanent signpost. A moth struck the windshield with a faint powdery smear. He wiped it once, but when it happened again, the same print appeared in the same spot, identical. His wife tried to laugh it off, whispering that maybe they were more tired than they thought, but her laughter trembled, thin as cracked glass. The rusted sign for the Riverside Hotel appeared once more, its arrow leading them deeper down the dirt track. This was the third time. He told himself maybe he was looping by mistake, turning at the wrong spot, yet his chest told him otherwise. When they finally gave up and turned back toward the main road, the forest broke open, and there it was, impossibly standing, tall and dark, a 6-story hotel, where before there had been only trees and shadow. The vacancy sign flickered to life in red before dying again, leaving them with more questions than comfort. The parking lot glistened with shallow puddles that did not ripple in the wind. His headlights brushed over an abandoned luggage trolley and a potted palm that had long ago withered, its leaves skeletal. The air was stale, as though no car had driven through in decades. Yet the lobby doors slid open automatically, as if expecting them. James swallowed hard and stepped inside. The lobby smelled faintly of damp carpet. A silver bell sat on the counter, and behind it a clerk appeared without footsteps, his shirt crisp and too clean for such a ruin. He didn't look at them when he spoke, only down at a ledger older than it should have been. "Long way from home," he said, as if reciting a practiced line. James signed the ledger, but the dates above his name all bore the same mark. June 12th. Dozens of signatures, all smudged, all identical in date, as though no one had checked out since that day. The clerk slid over a brass key tagged 604. "Elevator's working tonight," he added, with the strange smile of a man who had said those exact words too many times. The elevator doors opened before they pressed the button. Inside, their reflections bowed oddly in the warped metal walls, their faces stretched thin. James pressed the button for the 6th floor. The elevator hummed, climbed, but stopped at the 4th. Again, it stopped at the 4th. His wife urged they take the stairs instead. As they climbed, he noticed framed photographs of a river and a small wooden bridge. By the 3rd floor, the same photo repeated. On the 4th, the same again, with the same chip in the glass. By the 5th, he knew it was not multiple frames. It was the same one copied over and over, as if the hotel had no other memory to show. The 6th floor reeked faintly of soap gone stale, rainwater, and something sweet and sour underneath. The carpet vines seemed to slide subtly against their steps, never quite aligned, as though the floor itself was moving. They reached 604, but from the next room came the cheerful jingle of a child's cartoon. His heart froze. He knew that tune. It was their daughter's ringtone, the one she used when she called. His wife pressed her hand against the door of 602. James knocked. The ringtone cut off. Silence pressed in, broken only by the cough of a distant ice machine. They tried calling his mother. The phone showed full bars, but the screen froze at 2:37 a.m. She answered, sounding wide awake. "Still driving? It's only 11, she said. James explained where they were, but she insisted gently, almost amused, that no hotel had stood there since a flood washed it away years before. Her voice grew distant, swallowed by soft static. "Sleep a little and come in the morning," she told him, not hearing the desperation in his tone. Back in the lobby, the elevator brought them down before they even pressed a button. The clerk was waiting, expression unchanged. "Long way from home," he repeated. James struck the bell, but it made no sound. The clerk twitched, blinked, and reset to his smile, as if rewound. The words were the same, the cadence was the same. No one else was there to notice, and no one else would believe. They ran for the car. The moth struck the windshield once again. The radio restarted the same love ballad at the exact same lyric. "Don't hang up, I'm almost home." The odometer had not moved a mile. The forest funneled them back to the sign, to the same arrow, to the same dirt road, to the same impossible hotel waiting like a snare. His wife clutched his arm. "Stop fighting, please, just one night." Her whisper felt like surrender, and when they stepped back inside, the brass key for 604 was already waiting on the counter. In the ledger, beneath James's fresh signature, a line appeared in different ink. Checkout, 5:17 a.m. He hadn't written it. He stared until the numbers blurred, until the sound of the bell-less desk seemed louder than thought. The clock was gone. The hotel breathed. The loop was complete, and they had no choice but to play their part. The key in James's hand felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried more than brass and number. His wife clutched the red talisman tightly, fingers trembling. The older woman at the desk had vanished without a sound. The lobby, moments ago alive with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, now seemed swallowed by silence. They climbed the staircase, their footsteps hollow against the wood. On the second floor, the wallpaper peeled like old skin, patterns of faded flowers bending in the shadows. A draught ran through the corridor, though every window was sealed. James swallowed. "It's just an old place," he muttered. His wife said nothing, her knuckles white around the talisman. When they unlocked the door, the room inside was far too cold. Not the gentle cool of air conditioning, but a sharp, breath-stealing chill. The curtains moved, though the windows were shut. A faint hum, almost like a woman humming an old tune, drifted from the corner where the lamplight did not reach. Then the manifestation began. The wardrobe creaked open by itself, its hinges shrieking. From inside, a figure leaned forward. Pale skin glistened with moisture, as though she had drowned and been pulled back from the river. Her hair hung in clumps, dripping dark water that left stains on the carpet. The humming grew louder, fractured, as if multiple voices layered over each other. James froze. His wife backed into the wall, the talisman pressed to her chest. The woman's face tilted upward. Her eyes were hollow sockets, and yet he felt them lock on him. The hum twisted into a gasp, then a scream so sharp it made the light bulb above flicker and burst. Shards of glass rained down. The room seemed to stretch, walls bending outward like a stomach drawing breath. The floor pulsed, soft as wet earth. James reached for his wife, but his arm felt weak, heavy. The air thickened, every inhale scraping his throat. The figure dragged herself out of the wardrobe, joints cracking like breaking branches. She crawled on all fours, her limbs bending wrong, too long. With each movement, the smell of rot filled the room. Mud, blood, and the faint sweetness of something dead too long. His wife cried out, clutching him, but her voice sounded muffled, distant, as if they were already underwater. The red talisman in her hand began to burn. Smoke curled from the paper, crimson letters glowing before turning black. The woman stopped crawling. She tilted her head toward the talisman, and her scream shifted. Rage now, fury vibrating the glass in the window frames. The lamp exploded. Darkness swallowed them whole. Only the ghost's faint, wet outline gleamed, her body shaking violently. She lunged. James tried to run, but his legs betrayed him. He stumbled. His wife pulled at him, her sobs tearing through the blackness, but he felt paralyzed. A weight pressed down on his chest, invisible hands clutching his ribs. His vision blurred. The ghost's face was inches from his. The sockets widened, endless pits pulling him inward. He smelled the river on her breath, foul and metallic. Her jaw cracked open, far too wide, revealing a black throat that echoed with the sound of rushing water. His eardrums ached. Then, silence. The talisman in his wife's hand burst into flame. For a moment, the light cut through the darkness, showing the entire room. Stains crawling up the wallpaper like veins. The bed sinking inward as if something massive lay beneath. And the ghost, twisted, writhing, her body convulsing in the sudden glow. The flame died as quickly as it came. The talisman crumbled to ash. They were plunged back into darkness. Only the sound of dripping remained, steady, relentless, as though the ghost was still there, just beyond sight. James grabbed his wife, forcing himself to move, though every step felt like wading through cement. They stumbled into the hallway. The door slammed shut behind them, rattling on its hinges, but the sound followed. A slow, dragging crawl along the floorboards, a hiss of breath against their necks, though no one was there. By the time they reached the lobby, the old woman was standing at the desk again, smiling as though nothing had happened. Her hand gestured toward the box of envelopes, now sealed shut. "Every guest must leave something behind," she said softly. James opened his mouth, but no words came. His wife's eyes widened. She was clutching nothing. The talisman was gone. The woman's smile deepened. "You've left it already." The lights in the lobby dimmed. Somewhere upstairs, a scream tore through the night. James's chest still pounded from what he had seen through the peephole, that grotesque grin pressed against the glass, the tray of decaying food that seemed to shift in and out of reality. He couldn't shake the thought that this was no longer a hotel, but a trap, a place that wanted them inside forever. His wife sat on the bed, clutching the red talisman with desperate force, her lips trembling as she whispered prayers too soft to hear. "We have to leave," she said, voice fragile, and for once he didn't argue. He could no longer rationalize the whispers, the footsteps, the grinning face. Something was waiting for them, and if they stayed, they would not see the morning. He grabbed their bags clumsily, his hands shaking so badly the zippers refused to close. Finally, he yanked them shut and forced himself to breathe. The hallway outside was silent when he cracked open the door, but it was the wrong kind of silence, one that pressed in like invisible hands. They stepped out, moving quickly, their footsteps echoing too loudly against the carpet, as if the hotel wanted to broadcast their attempt to flee. The corridor stretched ahead, far longer than it had seemed before, lights buzzing weakly overhead, each one flickering as they passed beneath. From behind them came footsteps, slow, measured, like someone pacing just out of sight. James turned suddenly, his breath catching, but the hallway was empty. The footsteps didn't stop. His wife squeezed his arm hard enough to hurt. "Don't look back," she whispered, her voice brittle. He forced himself to face forward, each step heavier than the last. At the end of the corridor, the elevator doors glowed faintly like a promise. They stumbled toward it, pressed the button again and again until the doors screeched open. The inside smelled of dust and rust. They stepped in, clutching each other, and James stabbed at the button for the lobby. The doors closed. The elevator began to descend, groaning, then jolted violently. The lights flickered, and in the blink of an eye, the metal walls became warped wooden panels scratched with claw marks, smeared with dried handprints that looked too fresh. His wife screamed and covered her eyes. The walls seemed to breathe. Then, as if mocking them, the elevator snapped back into its steel box. James held his breath, heart pounding in his ears, until finally the doors rattled open. The lobby lay before them, empty, no staff, no box of envelopes. The front desk was bare, as if it had never been used. James grabbed his wife's hand and pulled her toward the glass doors. They burst outside into the night air. For a moment, relief rushed through them like water, but it didn't last. The parking lot stretched out under a weak moon, warped like a mirage. Their car was gone. The asphalt itself seemed to ripple, their footsteps echoing too loudly, hollow, like something massive lay beneath. James yanked his phone out. No signal. The screen flickered, frozen. His wife's breath came in sharp sobs. "We'll run," he said, though his voice was hollow. They ran across the lot, down the dirt road, into the forest. The branches arched overhead, like ribs closing around them. The road twisted, bending back on itself, every turn leading them deeper into the same shadows. It was as though the forest wanted to keep them, wrapping tighter with each step. Hours blurred together. Their breaths tore their throats raw. Just when despair threatened to crush him, James saw light, a faint line of dawn bleeding over the horizon. The forest thinned. Asphalt returned beneath their feet. When they turned back, the dirt road was gone. No hotel, no building. Only swaying trees and the whisper of wind. They staggered back into the city that morning. Their daughter ran to them with open arms, laughing. And for a moment James thought maybe he had dreamed it all. But dreams didn't leave scars this deep. At night, he couldn't pass a hotel without a chill racing down his spine. He avoided looking through peepholes, knowing what he might see. His wife tucked the talisman under her pillow, her sleep restless, filled with muffled cries. Sometimes he woke to find her standing silently by the door, listening for footsteps that weren't there. Meals became torture for James. One night his mother served fish, rice, and vegetables, and the scent turned sour in his throat, rotting in his memory. He fled the table, vomiting in the sink, unable to explain why. They survived, but survival is not the same as safety. Every so often, James swore he saw a shadow in a hallway, a grin in the corner of a window, a faint whisper outside his door. He told himself it was stress, exhaustion, imagination, but deep down he knew better. Some places do not let go of those who enter. Some doors, once opened, never truly close. And though they left before dawn, barely surviving, something of them had been taken, something they could never get back. The hotel did not need to keep their bodies. It already had their fear. James froze under the bed, chest heaving, his skin clammy with cold sweat. He had crawled beneath the frame only because he trusted his wife's desperate cry. Yet now, his eyes locked on the withered corpse beside him, leathery skin stretched tight over bone, its mouth gaping as if it had died mid-scream. For a split second he could not breathe, because the corpse's hair, even in decay, looked like his wife's. His mind wanted to scream that it was impossible, but his gut whispered what he already feared. The thing standing on the bed above him was not her. He reached out with trembling fingers and found something wedged between the corpse's cracked teeth. A slip of brittle paper, yellowed with age. In the dim light that filtered through the bed frame, he could just make out shaky handwriting in a mix of Vietnamese and Chinese. The words chilled him more than the sight of the corpse itself. The one who tells you to hide under the bed is already gone. Do not follow. James's breath caught in his throat. His wife's voice was still calling softly from above the bed. "James, come quickly, come with me, we must hide." But now every syllable felt wrong, like a tape played backward, like grief made into a sound. In that moment, everything he had ignored began to click into place, each detail like a puzzle snapping shut. The talisman his wife had drawn from the box in the lobby was not a gift of protection, as he had convinced himself. It was a seal, a binding that marked her for the ritual. The rotting food tray outside their door had not been some trick of housekeeping. It was a reminder that nothing living was supposed to be sustained here. The mysterious hotel, invisible the first time they passed, and suddenly looming when they gave up and turned back, was never built for travellers of this world. It revealed itself only to those chosen to enter the cycle of death. Even the smile of the old woman in the lobby, the way she had written James's name into the ledger by hand instead of using a computer. He realised it was not a record of guests, but a death register, a contract scrawled by the living on behalf of the dead. Long ago, he now understood, this was not a hotel at all, but a boarding house for desperate workers. When debts grew too heavy and hunger too sharp, the owner had spiraled into madness. One winter's night, he hung himself from a ceiling fan, the rope creaking through the night until neighbors cut him down. But the horror did not end there. They found his tenants huddled under their beds, eyes wide, lips cracked, bodies limp. Some were dead from suffocation, some starved, some strangled themselves in panic. All of them had obeyed his final insane command: hide under the bed, and death will not see you. The house closed, rotted, but its bones never left the ground. When new walls rose over it, the ritual remained. Anyone who entered was forced to repeat the madness, reenacting the lie that had killed so many before. James staggered backward on his elbows, scraping his shoulders against the frame as he tried to push away from the corpse. Above, he could see his wife's bare feet shifting on the mattress, her toes curling as she tied the rope to the fan. But when she bent down to look at him, hair spilling forward to veil her face, he caught a glimpse of the jawline, and it was wrong. The skin was too pale, too loose, too much like the leathery mask beside him under the bed. He heard her voice again, urging him to come, but now he knew it was stitched together from the cries of all the others who had died here. The corpse beneath the bed grinned, jawbones clicking, as if it had been waiting for him to understand. The smell of mildew thickened, the air pressing against his lungs. He could almost hear the echoes of those who had once hidden here, their whispers rising and falling like a broken chant. Under the bed, under the bed, under the bed. His pulse hammered in his ears, and for the first time that night, he realized there had never been a choice. From the moment they had pulled into the dirt road, the hotel had already decided his role. He was not a guest. He was a replacement. The corpse shifted closer, the parchment paper still clutched in its teeth, its message seared into James's mind. The figure above the bed leaned down, and the shadow of a rope swayed across the room. He wanted to cry out for his wife, to believe she was still alive somewhere in this nightmare. But another voice whispered inside him. The moment he answered her call, he would be gone too. The bed frame creaked, the corpse's head tilted, and James finally understood the truth. This place was not haunted by strangers. It was haunted by the act of obedience, by the lie that survival was possible if you just did as you were told. Every guest who checked in became part of the ritual, and every ritual ended the same way, with a body beneath the bed, waiting for the next. What would you do if you walked into a hotel at midnight, only to discover by dawn that it had never existed? When James ran outside and found his wife safe in the car, relief flooded him. But as the sun rose, the 6-story hotel had vanished. Only an empty wooden post stood where the sign had been. Later, he discovered the truth. The building had been abandoned since 1992, its walls left to rot, its windows shattered. Yet for one night, it had returned, waiting to trap whoever crossed its threshold. In Chinese folklore, this is not just coincidence. Abandoned places are believed to collect yin energy, a heavy, stagnant force that attracts wandering spirits. Ghosts replay their last moments, seeking company in their endless loop. Talismans at the entrance, peepholes with grinning faces, even trays of food, all of these are classic traps, meant to lure the living deeper into the ghost's realm. Once inside, escape is rare, unless luck or love pulls you out. So, I'll ask you, if you ever faced a place like this, would you dare to check in? Or would you keep driving into the night? Comment below, subscribe, and join us next time for more true-style Asian horror.